Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Jillian Turner, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 9 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. We begin tonight with our continuing coverage of the utter devastation caused by Hurricane Harvey. Some areas in Texas received over 50 inches of rain, creating what one scientist is calling a once-in-every-1,000 years flooding event. Vice President Mike Pence visited with storm survivors in Texas today, and President Trump is donating $1 million of his own money to storm victims. For the latest on Harvey and its aftermath, let's go to Steve Harrigan in Silsbee, Texas. Steve.
Jesse, no rain here right now, but east of Houston, the floodwaters keep rising, and that's really caught a lot of people here by surprise. Throughout the day, we saw a number of water rescues. Some people going out in flatboats to pick up neighbors, others to pick up their pets, and in the case we're about to show you, both.
We didn't really have much flooding until just this morning. It started coming past the fence line and started rushing to our yard. So we got 3 acres out there, and I want to say probably 4/5 of it's underwater.
Why'd you decide to come?
Well, we shut off the power. We didn't have no water or food, so we couldn't cook.
The rescuer in that case actually came from Arkansas. He told us that he had the resources and the time and wanted to help. He's been saving people for 2 days. Jesse, back to you.
Steve, thank you. The press is covering President Trump's every move related to Hurricane Harvey. And no matter what the president does, it seems the mainstream media says it's not enough.
I don't think that he understands the human scale of misery. I don't think that he can connect with the sort of compassion that you normally have when you see a disaster like this.
And it was very striking that he didn't mention the number of people who have died, or even, sort of try to empathize with the fact that people are genuinely suffering.
The fact that he saw no damage firsthand did not stop him from claiming on Twitter he witnessed, quote, firsthand the horror and devastation caused by Hurricane Harvey.
And today at the White House press briefing, the press corps seemed more concerned about illegal immigrants than anybody else affected by Harvey.
There are 575,000 undocumented immigrants in Houston, one of the largest populations in this country. Does this White House believe they should be eligible for long-term federal recovery assistance?
I'm just a little bit confused about your answer to Cecilia. I just want to go back to that on the idea of undocumented immigrants getting long-term funding. Is that a yes or a no? Does the administration support that?
You are an undocumented immigrant, and you did have a home, and that home was destroyed in a flood, and you are in a shelter. What happens?
What happens, Greg? All those undocumented immigrants, they're probably more deserving, according to the press corps, of relief than actual residents of Texas.
I would get being concerned, and being concerned about everyone, from the undocumented to the documented. But it seems to, when you listen to the press, it's as if only undocumented or illegal immigrants are involved in this disaster, which makes me think they really don't care that this is a political point that they're trying to make. I would never say the media is trying to do this. By the way, it was, both sides do this. The side out of power always goes after the side in power. During Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of criticism about Obama hugging Chris Christie. Do you remember that? Yeah. But the interesting thing, I think this is a different time. I don't think President Trump is as big a factor in this, because it seems like Texas represents such a positive, unifying force that people can't really turn this into a bad thing. It's like Texas's new motto should be, "We got this." Yeah. Because it's like Trump is not, the unity speaks for itself. So when you start talking about Donald Trump not being warm and fuzzy like a bunny slipper, people are like, we don't need it. We got this. We're fine. We don't need a cozy, fuzzy banana, or a bunny slipper. Bunny slipper as a leader. Right. As a leader, we can do it ourselves, and you see it every day. So I think it's really hard for the media to go after him at this point, because the visuals convey the message. They convey the message that he wants to convey, which is making America great again, which is the positive nature of people coming together. he's just kind of in the background. So they can't really, this stuff is baby games.
That's right. And the media thinks Texas wants tears.
Yeah.
And they want volunteers, they want food, they want shelter. That's not what Texas needs right now, Kimberly. But for some reason, the press wants the photo op of the president crying and hugging, like a Bill Clinton or an Obama.
Well, and if he did that, they would say that, oh, this is just totally put upon, filled with artifice. This is someone trying to save his political presidency. They would not have any time wasted hitting him and attacking him and saying that it was crocodile tears. What I think here is to be celebrated is the fact that people have come together in incredible, unparalleled humanitarian effort to be able to help one another, to be able to provide the funding, provide the food, the resources, the rescue efforts, to bring people together. This, to me, is a really shining example of the best of American cooperative efforts, trying to help one another, of our unity about what unites us rather than what divides us. So I think this has been, in a way, a time of healing through tremendous tragedy, where people have said, you know what, we really actually have so much more in common than what the media or the mainstream media or the press will tell us that divides us. And that, I think, is really important.
It is important, but the press seems focused on the empathy factor, Juan, and they're saying, I don't know how they get this information, that they believe that the president doesn't care and he lacks empathy towards the actual victims. Back up to the election, I think Hillary Clinton was the robot that couldn't connect and couldn't show empathy. President Trump won in November because he could empathize with that forgotten man, the victims of unfair trade deals, the victims of open borders and bad deals. That's what got him elected.
I'm not sure, but okay. I mean, I think that's an element. I mean, people say lots of things about what got him elected. I don't know for sure, but I tell you, when it comes to this issue, I think that, Kimberly, to me, was right on target. No matter what he did, if he had gone down to Texas, if he'd actually gone to the front lines, people would say, well, you know what, he's going through the motions to try to create an image that will appeal to Americans. Well, he didn't do it. So when the president says, but you didn't do it, and guess what? We have a Fox News poll out today that says only 26% of Americans think of him as a compassionate person. I think it plays in to a negative image about his weaknesses. And so the press then says, well, look, I mean, this guy doesn't seem very compassionate. And you guys say, oh, that's the mainstream press. Or on the immigrants issue, who has made immigration the centerpiece of his campaign? Maybe that's the reason he got elected, because he was hard on illegal immigrants in general. And now when people say, well, what about, are they stopping immigrants at the checkpoints? Are they going to do some kind of sweep at the shelters to find illegal immigrants? Are illegal immigrants eligible for benefits? All these questions bubble up because he has demonstrated such an antipathy towards immigrants.
Nobody looks for a surgeon based on empathy. They look for skill sets. It's like, that is the worst thing. Maybe a psychologist or a priest, if you want empathy. That's fine. Yeah. But the thing is, you're asking Trump for empathy. You don't get it. That's not why he was elected. You don't even have to like Trump to think he's a good president.
Right, but I agree with you. But I'm telling you, he's a politician. And we have seen, I think it was a highlight of President Bush's time when he stood there and says, I hear you, in the wreckage after 9/11.
Yeah. Okay, but I think they're trying to fit Trump into the political mold, and they're upset, the media is, because Trump's not playing by the media playbook. He's not going down there and hugging and crying like every other politician does. So then the media will write a story that says, because he's not acting, quote, acting like a politician,
he's not a presidential Jell-O mold. That's why.
I kind of feel like this is a question of leadership style, if we break it down to what we're really talking about here, right? I think it's fair to compare and contrast different presidents in the wake of national disasters. I think it's fair to evaluate all of them. It's fair to say, okay, President Trump has not taken on this sort of consoler-in-chief attitude. He has not maybe been so overly emotive. He's not been hugging people. But I think that to extrapolate from that, the idea that he is somehow not empathetic is not fair. And I think that's lazy analysis. I also think it's weird sort of like pop psychology that people are imposing onto the president.
It's mind reading.
I think that if we're going to talk about his leadership style in the wake of this storm, I think it has really been him adopting his chief executive officer mode. He's
Right.
put that hat on. He's established a clear chain of command. VP Pence was out on the ground today, clearly acting as the COO, you know, if America is this corporation. I think this is how he approaches it. It's like, we've got this strategic problem. How am I going to fix things? Who's going to handle what? Who am I delegating to? That's the style we've seen from President Trump. So it's fair to talk about what we think about that. But I think to condemn him for choosing one style over another is not fair.
And Shoegate continues, everybody. The Washington Post, I believe, Kimberly, doubled down on attacking Melania's high heels, saying totally fair game to go after the First Lady's choice of footwear. What do you think about that?
I don't know, but she had tennis shoes on or sneakers, whatever, kicks, whatever you guys want to call them these days.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a problem with that. I think this is childish, and I think it's immature. Why don't they cover the real stories that are out there about the human suffering and the people's will to live and to help and to give back and to try to, you know, unite people? They don't want to do that because that's not a fun story. They'd rather poke fun at somebody who's actually been a fantastic first lady and represented us well in an elegant way.
Why is it always only the women that
it's very sexist.
That annoys me. I think it is sexist.
This is what Washington Post did, which is so hilarious. They wanted to do this story, but they wanted to protect themselves from the criticism of being sexist. So the headline is, it's not sexist to go after Melania because the shoes implied that she wasn't thinking about others. I believe that the Washington Post was sexist in choosing a woman to do this story, Kayla Epstein, because that provided them with the camouflage to trash the First Lady. It's about trashing the First Lady. If you look at the Twitter feeds of Kayla Epstein, not a Trump fan by any means, but they used her sex to cover this. So she's just a pawn in the Washington Post, a way to avoid looking sexist. But I think that Kayla Epstein, she's on her way to getting a Pulitzer if they have a category for shoes.
Well, let me just say,
what's going on at the Washington Post?
First of all, let me just say, I think it was Robin Givhan, who is the Post fashion writer, who first wrote about this. And so maybe you could say, oh, well, it's the fashion people. Were they doing politics?
Washington Post, they assume that men can't write about shoes.
Well, no,
they assume that only women can do it.
Well,
let the chicks write about the shoes. That's sexist.
Is that sexist?
That's sexist.
Greg has a lot of thoughts on women's shoes.
Greg, I'm going to let you write a poem about my shoes.
Dozens of women's magazines. I've written for dozens.
But let me
it's sexist.
But let me just say, I saw in the New York Times today that their top story, the story that was most read in the New York Times yesterday, was guess what?
The shoes.
The shoes.
Yeah.
So I think there's widespread interest in this. Now, why?
Pandering.
Why? Oh, pandering? I don't know.
They're in the gutter where the shoe is.
I think there are a lot of people who see this as evidence that this is the high class, the super rich, the billionaire's wife, out of touch.
It's class warfare.
Right. And, well, okay.
It's class warfare.
But nonetheless, what it suggests is she's out of touch, and that, you know, Kimberly
just don't like her.
Kimberly, I hate to tell you this, but Kimberly said they didn't get to the sneakers. They did get to the sneakers. They said the sneakers were
glistening.
Were glistening.
Yes,
they
were glistening. No, glistening.
Never been worn before.
They didn't say she was the worst person for wearing the sneakers. I mean, it's just
how many
so
articles talked about
frivolous,
what the president was wearing?
Trivial.
Yeah.
I mean,
Where was the commentary about what Vice President
They
Pence
did talk about
was
because he was
today?
wearing a hat and a jacket that you can buy
All
on
right,
his website.
fine, but no criticism that he picked the
But he also
wrong
gave $1 million.
attire.
Okay.
But don't you see my point that Washington Post goes out of its way to find women to attack the women so they don't look sexist? But it's actually sexist to choose the women to be the attackers.
Happens all the time.
It's kind of sad and weird.
And Greg would gladly write about women's shoes if you just give him the chance.
I can write a mean piece on shoes.
Up next, Greg gives some much-needed context to the debate over monuments. Stay tuned.
If you were to describe these last few days with one word, it would be rescued. Because all we see are people being rescued. Pets, too, from rooftops, from cars. But you're also seeing another kind of rescue, one from all those conflicts that occurred before the flood. Stuff about statues and privilege and gender identity and trigger warnings. These stories still exist. But in times of crisis, they seem to fade. But some still pop up as a reminder of how things used to be. Right now, there are cities planning to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Day. I don't know what to think, except that it's got to be cool to have all that time on your hands to debate that stuff in dry, comfortable weather. Meanwhile, people are being airlifted from certain death. It's such a powerful contrast, at least to me. Now, these conflicts over statues and historical figures, they exist in good times because we have the time to discuss it. But a disaster rescues us from such reoccurring division. Now, I know we're supposed to hate each other, says the media. And it must be hard for identity activists to see folks in trucker hats or hoodies rescuing people of all stripes. They can't wait to get back to the rage when the waters recede. But for now, tribulation silences all tribes. It's the calm that came with the terrible storm. Kimberly, I'm trying to contrast between real reality and made-for-TV outrage. We can have discussions about Indigenous Day and all that stuff. If we're not living a horrible life, if we're not thinking about how we're going to get back to our home.
Yeah, well, this is the problem, yes. And when you see the faux outrage and the stories that people try to create and manufacture this, it seems so disingenuous, especially in the face of what we're witnessing and the Hurricane Harvey, the aftermath, the humans struggling, what in fact is going on a daily basis, minute by minute. We can't even imagine it if we were put in this position with our family and friends and wondering if our loved ones, where they are. They still haven't begun even recovery efforts in terms of the waters because they're too high. So the contrast is very difficult because now everything has become this completely elevated, blown out of proportion, hyperbolic catastrophe and crisis that nobody can seem to try to get their heads around. No matter how small it is, it becomes something that is magnified, to 1,000x.
You know, Juan, Mayor de Blasio said before the flood that he was going to review all the hate statues in New York City. And I think it's a really good thing that he's doing this because obviously he's so shameful of the Democratic past and their love for slavery that he's finally agreeing to get rid of these reminders of his party's shameful past.
Wow. Now that's a question.
It's called loaded.
It's loaded.
I forgot to put a question mark at the end of it. So anyway, what do you think about Columbus Day?
I can't wait to have it off. I don't get it off. I forgot.
And Columbus Circle.
Columbus Circle. You know what strikes me is that when we talk about the fact that the storm comes and that's a moment when we come together when there's crisis, I think it's true. I'm reminded there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal today written by James Baker and Andy Young. So James Baker used to be Secretary of State, and Andrew Young, former mayor of Atlanta, UN ambassador, I believe. And it basically said, we have to start talking to each other. We have to get back to the idea of solving problems. It reminded me of what the Defense Secretary Mattis said. He said the biggest problem we have is not ISIS or the terrorists. The biggest problem is our political structure is so broken, so polarized, we can't resolve anything here at home. We can't talk to each other.
Right.
And so to me, when you see the storm, just picking up on what you said, Greg, I think you're right. I think that it's a moment. It's almost like, you see people in the military or you see people on a police department. When you are dealing with something terrible, even with Jesse and me yelling at each other, guess what? I'd have his back. I mean, I trust he would have mine. It's just that kind of moment in life where, you know what? So I don't like the statue. You don't like the statue. You know what? I didn't like your mama. Oh, okay.
Hey, take it easy.
Take it easy.
Right there.
Oh, my God.
Now I'm not going to save you.
So now your mom is off.
Mrs. Waters. Mrs. Waters, we're not talking about you.
I think your mother agrees with Juan more than she agrees with you.
100% of the time.
She's long-suffering.
You know how there's some people in life and you just can't picture the fact that they have parents? Yeah. Like Seinfeld, that's you.
That's me.
I can't believe that you have parents.
Oh, my God.
It's like you were
My parents can't believe they had me.
Yeah. Well, now that we've veered off topic, Jesse, these certain conflicts can only happen if everything else is going great, right?
We're so spoiled. Being offended by a statue or by a holiday is a luxury that Texas wished they had.
Right.
And, they're renaming holidays. I just care if I'm off or not. I don't care what you call it. Indigenous, Columbus, it doesn't matter. Speaking of indigenous peoples, indigenous people all over the world live in Harvey-like conditions almost every day, where they lose their homes, they're worried about how wet they are, they're cold, they're hungry. That's the norm for those people. People act like being offended is worse than being starving, being wet, being homeless, being broke, being poor. I would rather be offended instead of all of that stuff, but people are so coddled in this country, they can't experience discomfort. they can't experience offense.
Right.
They think that's the worst thing in the world. So they walk around on eggshells, protecting other people, protecting themselves, and they have all their priorities out of whack. The LA City Council is voting on a holiday. Meanwhile, LA is it's like going to hell in a handbasket, and they're worried about a holiday.
And it's like 100 degrees there, too, by the way, right now.
I mean, come on.
So literally, hell.
Well, there you go. Jillian, I think that all social justice warriors should be forced to watch the coverage of the storm nonstop, just to see what real suffering is like and how people come together and all these lines of demarcation kind of fade away.
You know, it's interesting because this guy walked into my office in the wake of Charlottesville, and he said, this is the only country where we're short-fused, so short-fused that we're going to spark a civil war in response to monuments that were erected in the wake of the last civil war. And I thought, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
You're welcome.
So there's this idea of like transformative justice, and that is really important, right? People have to feel like they're welcome in the United States, and people have to feel like their own unique individual, cultural heritages are respected at the very least, right? But it gets to a point where you can't. I lived in a country in South Africa for 2 years during graduate school where in the wake of apartheid there, people are so scared of anything that is unique nationally, culturally in any way that they have a list of like 75 national holidays, and they're called things like Family Day, Women's Day, Youth Day. That's where we're headed here.
I don't mind that. I do not mind that.
Buy me a plane ticket.
Yeah.
Just go down to Texas or Louisiana. I think they have the most holidays in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
But you don't want to get to a point where nothing is celebrated. Do you know what I mean? Everything is so generic that it actually doesn't mean anything.
I think we just have to put our priorities, do a reset as a country in terms of putting things in perspective about what really matters in life, the health and safety of your loved ones. Look at the people out there. Their lives have been deleted. Literally, everything they knew, things that they loved, their possessions, anything that was tangible that they created or had for their families, gone.
So more holidays, more statues, that's the consensus?
There we go.
Yeah. All right.
I think we've solved every world problem. Coming up, the Russia story the press doesn't want to report. We'll be right back with that.
Saw you moving from the overhead, all right? The media might have a tough time covering this story because today the Trump administration said it had ordered 3 Russian diplomatic facilities in the United States to close. That's in response to the Kremlin's demand last month that the U.S. reduce its diplomatic staff in Russia by hundreds of individuals.
We've taken a firm and measured action in response to Russia's unfortunate decision earlier this year. We want to halt the downward spiral, and we want to move forward towards better relations. We'll look for opportunities to do that, but we also want to have equity in the decisions.
The tough on Russia move by the Trump administration doesn't exactly fit into the media's collusion narrative, does it?
Donald Trump is afraid. He's trying to exude power and strength. He's afraid of something that Mueller and the prosecutors are going to find out. And what you're seeing time after time is a president who is within himself seized with fear. And that's going to be, a political hurricane is out there at sea for him. We'll call it Hurricane Vladimir, if you will, the whole Russian thing.
Nice little weather analogy. Greg, have fun.
I just realized Dan Rather has been right fewer times than a stopped clock. I don't think anybody's ever said that on television before, and I'm glad that I said it. For the Democrats and the media, the Russian story is their stress ball. When they can't handle Trump, when Trump's doing well, things are happening, they have to squeeze the Russian story. Squeeze. But it's less effective than the stress ball because it builds no muscles. It's so funny to watch the Democrats who used to think the USSR were wonderful when they could destroy us. Now think they're okay when they're 1/8 the size. Yeah, I don't know. There are 2 roads to take here. Be like Dianne Feinstein and say, look, give the president a chance. You won't go crazy. Or cling to the Russian story. Think he's going to fantasize that he's going to be impeached every day. You're going to go insane. You are going insane.
Well, it's actually happening.
Yes.
You're witnessing it live. Yes. All right, Jillian.
I think, so if we put politics aside for a second, we talk about what actually happened with this. I worry that we can cut and cut and cut, because this all started with President Obama expelling, I think it was 35 Russians, at the end of 2016, right before he left office in retaliation for election meddling. Then they cut 750 Americans. Now we can cut and cut and cut until there's no one left on diplomatic channels on either side in either country. And then everybody loses because we have no way to communicate with the Russians anymore. And whether we like them or not, whether we want to talk to them or not, we actually really have to communicate with them about some very important issues that are on the table between us, like the Syrian civil war, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like all different kinds of things.
That's why confliction is so important.
Yeah, but I do commend the Trump administration in this instance. They did say the Russians, that they're closing consulates in a few small offices. Those people, the Russians who work there, can be reassigned. So we're not expelling them from the country, which is smart, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, is it comparable? I mean, the way that you guys talk about it, you think, oh, well, you know, President Trump's actually punishing the Russians. But in fact, the Russians kicked out 60% of our diplomats at our key embassy in Moscow, right?
Which was stupid.
Well, that damages our abilities to do what you were talking about, Jillian, which is communicate and talk. We didn't kick out any of their people now. We've kicked out 35 earlier. That's minuscule by comparison to 60% of all your diplomats. Yeah. And then, you know, what compounded this from the position of the State Department is that when the Russians, and of course we're talking about here the evil Vladimir Putin, kicked out the Americans, President Trump's reaction was, ha, 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 thanks for helping us cut the size of government. Wow. So what do you hear from people in the State Department?
That joke went right over your head, Juan.
Oh, yeah. It went right to the heart of people who work in the State Department who didn't think it was a joke.
Well, I think everybody knew it was a joke because it was funny. And Trump's so friendly with Russia.
I guess he did.
Trump's so friendly with Russia. He's closing down consulates. He's bombing their allies. He's exporting cheaper energy. Vladimir Putin, for a KGB guy, Juan, must be not very good at blackmail because it's not working very well. I don't think anything's really happening here. You really believe that Trump's pretending to be tough on Russia so it looks like he's not colluding? Because that's what the conspiracy is. He's sitting around and he's like, hey, Rex, close some consulates. MSNBC's hot on the tail. And you know what? Send some steaks over to Paul Manafort because he might sing to the feds. Yeah. Oh, no, Dan Rather's connecting the dots. We better fire Mueller. You got to be kidding me.
Stone Cold Crab.
I mean, the conspiracy theories have run totally wild, and it's hilarious that Dan Rather, of all people, is out in front of it.
But you got to agree that we didn't do anything.
I don't have to agree with anything you said, Juan.
I know. I forgot.
Why the Omaha steaks, though?
No, Trump steaks.
Trump steaks, yeah.
Did I say Omaha?
No, you said steaks.
I said steaks.
Yeah.
Of course they're Trump steaks. Only the best, Jillian. Juiciest, most marbleization.
Wow. I mean, you are just like a walking infomercial.
Send some
you must
steaks
be
this way.
So back together. I mean, you didn't give anybody the Trump ties.
Oh, that's right. Throw some ties in. Why not?
But, you know, it is unfair to us. It does hurt a lot of people that have, I'm speaking personally, but a lot of this stuff,
Bad body
a lot of people want to see their family in Russia. They go back and forth. So these kind of retaliation moves do end up hurting people, you know, that have family in Russia and have family in the United States. And so it's a bit of a problem, but hopefully it's temporary. But these steps kind of resemble action when they really aren't.
And they've been happening for, what, decades? This is what you do diplomatically. And we're always going to be adversaries with the Russians, no matter how many people try to warm them up. Even Donald Trump wants to warm it up. There's a lot of hawks, a lot of defense contractors that want us to be adversaries, and we will for a very long time.
Oh, what happened to the Trump reset? I don't know.
I don't know. Ask Hillary.
Yeah, where's that button?
But every president that comes to office tries a reset with Russia. Every president. And it lasts like a couple months.
Nevertheless, he won't get credit for this either. So one of the NFL's most popular stars has a surprising take on the Colin Kaepernick debate. That's next. Stay with us.
Welcome back to The Five. Two-time MVP winning quarterback Aaron Rodgers surprised many this week when he told ESPN that he thinks Colin Kaepernick should be on an NFL roster and wasn't signed yet because of his refusal to stand for the national anthem. At least one sports analyst is highly skeptical about Mr. Rodgers' comments.
If Aaron Rodgers was really down for the cause, you know what? He's got a lot of power in Green Bay. You know what? Kaepernick should be my backup quarterback. Kaepernick should be on our roster.
No. That's not going to...
Clearly it's not going to happen because it ain't what he believes.
Wow. And you know what's interesting is Tony Romo, famous for having quarterbacked the Dallas Cowboys, he also says Colin Kaepernick, good enough, no question. And he would be on a team if he could bring a championship, but he's kind of like
he's not a closer.
He's not the championship quarterback anymore. So what do you think, Kim?
Oh, I totally agree. Listen, I didn't like him before the whole take a knee thing, and I'm a huge San Francisco 49ers fan, right? Greg is too, and he's not the kind of quarterback that we were accustomed to. This was a dynasty that we had in San Francisco. People delivered. Joe Montana, Steve Young, okay?
John Brody, Steve DeBerg.
Oh. How far are you going to go?
Point is, if he was that good, believe me, they'd overlook it. When Michael Vick was like, beating dogs and doing the hang thing and accused of all that stuff of the dog fighting, people still wanted him, didn't they? After he came back out, they're like, we'll sign him,
So give me your bottom line. Is it the case that he is being kept out? Is he being blackballed by the NFL?
I don't think he's being blackballed. I think people want championships and want wins on the table. They want people in the stadium. And you have to have a quarterback and a backup quarterback that's going to deliver. And it depends on the individual needs of each team, whether or not they have somebody that's a backup. So, I mean, look, if I thought he was great enough and I was like a top quarterback, I'd say, okay, bring him in as my backup, et cetera, to, win, or if I got injured or whatever. That's not the case here. I really don't think so.
That's
honestly.
A really good point, though. Like, you can literally torture dogs and still find a place in the league.
Yeah.
So, like...
Yeah, if you have 4.4 speed and a rocket arm.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, this is the point. That's the point, right?
Well, no,
right.
but the point... But the other point is that you see people who are talent evaluators say, yeah, he is one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league, and he doesn't have a job.
Yeah, he's got a lot of talent. He could be a decent backup quarterback for almost every single team. But what owner wants to sign a guy like that? He's a lightning rod. The fans aren't going to like it. The media is going to come in and go crazy in preseason. Every single game, every question is going to be thrown at you after the game about that. He's going to be divisive in the locker room. No one's going to want to deal with it. Football's a team sport, and when you have someone like that causing so much controversy inside and outside the locker room, he's not worth it. He's not talented enough to deal with.
Yeah,
so you don't think there's a blackball situation?
I think owners don't want to sign him because he attracts a lot of negative attention, and he's not worth the risk.
So a distraction. Greg?
Yeah, I mean, blackball implies that everybody met in a room and said, we're not doing it. In this case, it's people making a business decision saying, is this going to hurt? Is this going to hurt tickets?
Sure.
Is this going to hurt the team? I have a solution for Colin Kaepernick. He needs an exit ramp out of this controversy. I think at this week or next week, he should announce that after watching the heroism that took place this week, I realize how unique and special this country is and how lucky I am to be here. I allowed myself to get bogged down in a lot of negativity, but now I'm woke. I see what America is. Now I'm redefining my patriotism by the heroism, the individualism, and the stick-to-itiveness, and the we got this of Texas. And then I'm proudly standing for my country from now on after what happened with the storm.
Wow.
If he did that, I'd sign him.
Yeah, that's exactly what he should do.
Oh, so there is a blackball.
Sign him to the 5, and it'll be the 6.
Well, he'd sign him as like the third string.
The third, is that what he would do? So, Jillian, here's the thing. When we heard from Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, he not only said that he thought this guy deserved the job and was being, blackballed, basically. He also said that when he talks to his teammates, he understands that Kaepernick is protesting being unfairly pulled over, stopped, harassed. And he says, I don't have experience with this. He's a white quarterback, and he's very prominent and successful. Do you think that Rodgers is feigning empathy or truly seeking to understand?
No, because if you read the transcript of that interview, I actually thought his interview was really smart. I liked what he said later on, which is that I personally am not going to join this standing movement because of the way I feel about the American flag. However, I respect the sort of civil rights issues that my league mates are trying to bring into the national spotlight by doing this. So I'm never going to denounce them for doing this. Meaning he's taking an issue that has been so racially charged and really deciphering the core, which is that it's a free speech issue.
Well,
which is a smart thing to do, I think. You can disagree.
No one is denying his right to kneel and disrespect the flag. But business owners have a choice to also
are.
say, we're not going to hire a guy like that. He doesn't represent our brand.
Well, it's
but then
ticket
aren't
sales too.
Isn't free speech kind of part of the issue there, right? Because they don't like the message.
But Jillian, if I decided
they
on
don't
the
like
5,
the message of someone being unpatriotic representing their franchise.
Jillian, if I decided on the 5 that I wanted to throw a football around during the show, I would be fired.
Sorry?
If I decided on the 5 that I wanted to throw a football around during the show, I would be fired because that's not my role.
Hannity does it.
Yeah. I got there first.
You stole my line. All right, yet another Hillary Clinton scandal over pay-for-play allegations. That report up next.
During the 2016 presidential campaign, Hillary Clinton was plagued with pay-for-play allegations involving her foundation. Well, that's not stopping her from selling access in the private sector. Tickets to meet Secretary Clinton backstage on her book tour coming this fall at certain locations will cost readers over $2,000. Okay, so you guys are all pretty familiar with the book circuit.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of this? Juan, what do you think what should this cost? Is $2,000 within reason?
I'm glad when anybody shows up to that. But I'm going to say...
National bestseller, Juan.
Okay. But I'm just saying, typically you or I or Greg, Jesse, anybody would
haven't written a book yet.
Come to the book. But you know what? She's charging almost $3,000, Jillian, in Toronto, and it's sold out. So you know what? The free market said, apparently people... And what you get is you get a front row seat. You get to meet her, take a picture with her.
This is when the
and
Clintons
you get
like the free market.
Yeah, what?
And they're benefiting.
Well,
right.
That's
the only time. What is it with Clintons and the money? How many pantsuits does Hillary need?
It's the new Clinton Foundation.
Wait. Okay, $2,400, front row seats, a photo, a signed book. That's what you get. This is a great...
Scooby snack.
It's a great deal when you consider the alternative. Her being president. This is a bargain for everybody involved.
And so all the Trump voters should go.
Yes. I pay $2,400 so she's not president.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you should get 2 signed copies.
Exactly.
Such a good point. But they love the money. They just do it. They just love it. They lay awake at night like, how can we make some more money? And also, I think this really is about trying to test the waters to see if she can run again. She still won't accept that she lost. Absolutely. This is campaigning. It's cashola and campaigning. That's what it is. She gets out in front of as many people as she can, rehabilitate her image, show that she's still got some zing in her step, that she's not fainting, etc., that she's of good health, and she knows how to make a buck, and she gets to tell her side of it. This makes total sense for me from like a political strategy and for the Clinton, quote, dynasty, but I just think the Democratic Party is probably going to say no mas.
Well, also because... You know, it does make sense from a political strategy perspective if she's campaigning again, because what else are you raising money for? I mean, for her, $2,000 a pop to, you know, for these kind of, she can get millions of dollars just for going and giving
every penny
talks
counts,
here and there,
Jillian. Come on. The Clintons are greedier than Trump.
She wants to create the idea of demand, too. That, see, people want to pay for me. Mama still got it, like that.
The big winner in all this, of course, is Bill. She's out of the house. He goes
out of the woods.
Chappaqua, watch out.
He goes into the backyard. He digs out the safe with the black book, pulls it out, goes through. And
it's hunting season.
She'll be gone for 3 months. Yeah. I'll get to the letter M.
But you know, Joe Biden has a book coming out.
Terrible.
Is it a picture book?
Sorry. So Bernie Sanders had a book come out this month.
Yes.
About revolution, right?
Yes.
And so you got Elizabeth Warren already had a book out this year. Al Franken had a book out this year. I guess these people are kind of trotting out ideas, building profile and their personal story in order to potentially win votes. But Kimberly says, and I got to ask Kimberly, you think she's going to run again?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, from people that I know that are close with her, they feel like, you know, she feels like she was cheated out of it, that still she should have her moment as the first American female president. And that's what I think if you really asked her in her truest heart, what would you really like? It's really not the money at this point, but it is the opportunity to try to campaign and show people that she still got it and she should still lead the party.
I support another Hillary candidacy. I think that would be fantastic. I encourage her to run. I would donate to the campaign.
Do you know, you know how I knew that Bernie Sanders has a new book out?
Oh.
Donna Brazile got it for me.
Oh,
Get it?
Yeah, I mean, the wit, the intellect is just sharp as a razor's edge, even at this hour.
It was a convoluted joke. I agree.
All right, well, 4 of us will be right back, but Kimberly has to take off right now to go host Hannity, which airs right here at 10 p.m. Stick with us and check her out then.